You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to episode 199 of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Morgan Burkett, Zach Chavalella, and it's post Super Bowl. So that means we have apparently about 200 days where we're going to hear nonstop whining from San Francisco. How do we feel about this, gentlemen?
Love it, man. Love it. Bring it on. Like, I don't know. I that's exactly the way I wanted the Super Bowl to go, I think. Like, make it tough on Mahomes. I still got love for Big Red. Like, I'm happy to see Andy Reid win another Super Bowl. And most happy to watch the 49ers immediately start blaming each other and turning inwards and saying they didn't know the overtime rules, et cetera, et cetera. It's exactly the loss I thought was going to happen. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I don't think Eagles fans could have asked for a better outcome considering going in. People were asking me who was I rooting for? A friend of mine who's a Giants fan, who's coincidentally not Brian, but a different friend of mine who's a Giants fan. Back when the Eagles and Patriots played each other in the Super Bowl, I asked him who he was rooting for, and he said that he was rooting for the Meteor, meaning that he would rather a meteor hit the earth than one of those two teams win. That's kind of how I felt going into it. But now, after the fact, after Kansas City won, I feel a lot better about the Chiefs winning that game. I feel a lot better about Travis Kelce getting another one. I'm not someone who's blinded by the Taylor Swift hate, which I think is a bit ridiculous. I absolutely love the dysfunction coming out of San Francisco. It brings me a whole new sense of energy and purpose. So, all things considered, best case scenario.
Can we talk about the Taylor Swift stuff really quick? I was talking to my wife about this, and I feel like Taylor Swift is the perfect antidote for what we could have been encountering this Super Bowl. We could have had Brittany Mahomes and Jackson Mahomes completely just annoying the life out of us, but instead we had Blake Lively, we had Taylor Swift. Like it was sentimental, it was meaningful, it was cool, it was cute, it was popish. We didn't have to deal with those two assholes. But yes, the 49ers are imploding before our very eyes. I mean, you have guys blaming each other. You have Feliciano blaming his peer for pretty much taking him out of the game. Drake Greenlaw, I mean, is it Greenlaw, right? Or is it Kinlaw? Greenlaw, yeah, I get them confused all the time. He was so happy that he left the game early.
Is the guy you're thinking of.
There we go, Javon Kinlaw. So happy that he left the game early. And then you have Brandon Ayuk. Did you guys see his girlfriend coming on Instagram and then Twitter? Like, yeah, it's gonna be harder on the wives because they got to deal with these guys, and out of nowhere, hey, we're not gonna be back at in San Fran. Like, bro, what the hell is going on? Because you didn't hear this out of Philly. Like, Philly was like, no, we'll be back. San Fran's like, nah, we're packing our bags. We got to go elsewhere. Like, that's this is the most beautiful thing, I think, as a football fan that you can encounter, because I feel like the 49ers have to be the highest hated team outside of the Cowboys, at least in my opinion.
I think for me, it just like it doesn't really. I mean, San Fran with the history they have with the Eagles is one thing, and I'm happy to see that. But the other thing that it reaffirms is you can't buy a team and go to the Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. It just doesn't work. And I don't know. Like if nothing else comes with this Super Bowl, I hope that teams start to realize that, and like they've mortgaged their future for so long and just accumulated players. And I get it, similar to what the Eagles have done in the past, but there just seems to be a different kind of tone to it, where it's just like, all right, we're just gonna get as many good players as we can, pay them whatever, and worry about it in the future. And you just can't buy chemistry. And I think that that's kind of what happened. You're seeing is like they were holding it together at the seams for as long as they could. And then, the one promise you have when you buy a team is that, okay, we're going to take you to a Super Bowl. So, it doesn't work, which I love, because that again, just kind of gets into a different sport. I think like you can do that in some other sports, you can get away with it, but football, it's always been a team sport, and you just can't buy chemistry.
Yeah, you really can, and that's been such a major factor in some of Philadelphia's more successful teams, especially as of late, and really kind of the fall of the Super Bowl team. Not that you can place it on any one individual thing. There was a lot of contributing factors, but as that locker room began to kind of separate, and we saw the division between the quarterback and several players, a certain unnamed player in the locker room, and several other players as well, between the coaching staff and the players. It's that lack of chemistry that eventually led to that unraveling of that Super Bowl team. But for San Francisco, it looks like it's happening a lot quicker. And the excuses, I mean, absolutely are piling up at just as quick, if not a quicker rate than they were last season after the Eagles knocked them out of the
The
playoffs.
rules, Mom. I didn't know. I didn't know those rules that were changed so often.
Changed 3 years ago, which is the crazy part.
You hear one person saying how they didn't know the team did not know the rules of overtime. You hear another person saying that they specifically wanted the first possession because they wanted the third possession theoretically. And then you hear someone on the defense come out and talk about how they wanted the second one because if you score, you go for two, which is, I think, the most aggressive, possibly the most common philosophy is just that you want to give yourself the opportunity to win the game in that scenario. And it just, for whatever reason, it's not what Kansas City, or rather not what San Francisco went with. And Kansas City is pretty, I don't want to say grateful because they definitely earned that win, but they're pretty happy with the result, I'll say.
Yeah, I feel like the lack of preparation on the 49ers front is laughable because last season it was all about Eagles couldn't, they wouldn't beat us if we were healthy. Which granted, yes, you did beat the Eagles this year. You beat a very broken Eagles team. You possibly may have dismantled them a little bit more. I give you kudos to that. But at the end of the day, like your QB that everybody was raving about couldn't get it done on that final drive in overtime. He had to get bailed out by the referee on that first third and out, right? And then the second time around, like he couldn't even get a pass to his main wide receivers. And where the hell was Brandon Ayuk? Like I feel like he was barely used all game. Like how do you have those kind of weapons and just not use them? But again, like to piggyback what you're saying, like the lack of preparation, it just it's I'm sorry, I just can't say without laughing. Like this team was so unprepared. Their spirit was completely dismantled. Their head coach 0 for 3 in the Super Bowl, and everybody in the world has been praising him as if he's the second coming of Bill Belichick or his father. He's a hell of a coach, creative guy. Brilliant offensive mind, right? But this team is not that team, and their Super Bowl window is closing by the minute. Just for the simple fact that you have all these guys are going to be due for big contracts. You have Brock Purdy, who after next season can be due for a bigger contract if that's your guy. It's just they don't have the window that the Eagles have at the moment, and it's a beautiful sight because that means the NFC is somewhat wide open, and you do have the Packers creeping up. You do have Minnesota. If Kirk Cousins could get together, they could be something. And you have the Lions. But as of right now, it's just looking like a bit of a wide open conference. But one thing I do want to talk about, I mean, like, let's give praise to the Chiefs, right? That secondary, it was envious. Like, hats off to those guys. McDuffie, Snead, like, those guys were just balling out of their mind, and they were holding the 49ers offense in check. And as an Eagles fan, that was a sight for sore eyes. Like, I wish I had that in Philadelphia. How did you guys feel about the Chiefs defense and what this could mean for a team like the Eagles going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stuck out to me is realistically all over the board is just a masterclass of coaching by the Chiefs coaching staff. Like at every turn, even when they were down, it just felt like not only was there a belief from the players, but a belief in the coaching staff that they would figure out a way to win. I mean, you saw how good the scheme of Spagnuolo was. Like he just figured out ways to get pressure against a really good offensive line and what had been an almost impenetrable communication on that offensive line as well. Like they had so many teams that tried and failed to slow down that run. And again, the 49ers were going to get theirs. Christian McCaffrey is probably the best player in the league outside of Patrick Mahomes, the best player that doesn't play quarterback right now, I think. And there's it's controversial maybe that statement, but man, like when it mattered most, they found ways to get in the backfield and be disruptive. And I mean, you're talking about that secondary, like it just works in tandem, right? So, if the secondary was making plays, then the next play was followed up by that front seven and vice versa. Like, and that only really comes from having one, chemistry, which I mentioned earlier, but two, just a great all around coaching staff using their players to their advantage and to their abilities. And I think that that's kind of where, like you talked about Ayuk, right? Like, there were so many times they're trying to feed Ayuk the ball downfield and stuff like that. And sometimes you just got to give him the ball, right? Like, Deebo Samuel, like, is he a great receiver? Maybe not, but he's special with the ball in his hands. And they just weren't able to find ways on the flip side, on the 49ers side, to get them the ball. And, and vice versa. The Chiefs don't really have a crazy receiving core or anything like that, but they were able to find ways to utilize their playmakers. And that was the difference in the game for me.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with Morgan that it really starts with coaching. I mean, just watching what Steve Spagnuolo was able to do is, I mean, the term masterclass was already used, but it just absolutely incredible. But when looking beyond that, because you can scheme as much as you want, and you can run just an absolute perfect scheme. But if you don't have any semblance of strong personnel, then you're not going to accomplish what you're looking to do with that scheme. And we've seen that in Philadelphia at times. So Spagnuolo, I think, absolutely was the key, the top difference maker on that defense specifically. But when you look at this Kansas City defense, it's one that doesn't have a lot of holes. It's a lot different than Philadelphia, where they don't do a lot of the same rotations on the defensive line. You have a lot of their players that are actually just they're grinding it out. They're staying out there longer and harder. Some of these players, they're not as big and sexy the names that you're possibly even seeing, like perhaps before in Philadelphia. Obviously, they have Chris Jones. I would say George Karlaftis is really making a strong name for himself. But they just have any supposed hole, they still have a contributor in there. And then when you move at every single level, you have strong contributors to stars. You're looking at Chris Jones on our defensive line. You look at the linebacking core, and it's absolutely insane, from Willie Gay to Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquill, just a stellar linebacking core. And then you move into the secondary. You have L'Jarius Sneed. Trent McDuffie has been fantastic for the Chiefs this season, and
Absolutely.
he was once again in that game as well. And so it really just goes to show that you absolutely do need personnel as well. That's been the big difference this season in the Chiefs defense versus past seasons, where it's been fine to good, but this whole season it's been a completely different Chiefs defense. And the play, in addition to that scheme from Spagnuolo, but the play of these players has really what's been elevated it even more so. So it's something that Philadelphia is not going to be able to emulate that in 1 year. I know there's probably some people who look at the Chiefs defense and like, I want that, and I can certainly understand why. But you're talking about a 3 linebacker deep defensive scheme. You're talking about a guy in Chris Jones who Kansas City is going to have to do everything they can to keep him tied up, because just one of the top performers at his position. And then you're talking about 2 just incredible corners in L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie as well. Philadelphia, if they're going to try and keep up with the Joneses in a sense, you're going to have to make some acquisitions this offseason if you're going to even compete with a team like that defensively.
I completely agree with that. And I mean, Snead is also a free agent, if I'm not mistaken, unless he gets franchised. It's ideally Philly could follow the same blueprint, right? I mean, the offense carried the Kansas City for so long. The Chiefs defense hasn't always been that great, right? They're finally coming into their own when the offense is starting to fall off the wagon. I feel like, next season you can actually rely on the Eagles offense with Kellen Moore back there now, possibly a more healthier Jalen Hurts, more level-headed AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and make things happen. But I completely agree with you. Like, the way they built their defense from top to bottom is just it's how you do it at the end of the day. Like, that's how you build a defense. From linebackers, offensive linemen, to the cornerbacks, to the safeties, and they're everybody was bought into what they needed to do to win, and that's what matters most. And you're talking about acquisitions now. Ironically, you can't go Super Bowl without talking about the Eagles, right? On the day of the Super Bowl, it was reported that Haason Reddick was given permission to seek a trade. Now, for those out there who don't really know the difference between requesting a trade and giving permission, this means the Eagles and Haason Reddick are far apart in contract negotiations, and they're allowing him to go see his value, go see his worth, come back to the table, and if it makes sense for the Eagles to extend him, they will. If it doesn't, then they'll try to make sense with the other team as to what the the worth for trading for Haason Reddick should be. I get it; it's a business, but Haason Reddick is not just a regular guy on this defense. This is the best pass rusher on defense. Josh Sweat kind of fell off in the second half. We don't know what Jalen Carter fully is because in the second half, Jalen Carter also fell off. And mind you, these guys were gassed. I get that. But you don't have much after Haason Reddick. You have an aging Brandon Graham. You have an unproven Nolan Smith. You have little guys here and there that could trickle in. But Haason Reddick, I feel like the energy he brought in 2022 is contagious enough where if he can get buy into Vic Fangio's defense this season, then you can have that fierce defensive line like you once had. How do you guys feel about this issue right now with Philadelphia and Haason Reddick?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of painted a good picture. I think realistically, if I'm Haason Reddick's camp, I'm looking at not only the contract he already has, which expires after this year, and it was pretty team friendly to begin with when he signed here, right? He wasn't the highest paid in the market at the time, I believe, and took a hometown discount to come here. And I think you're looking at the Eagles roster, and how he's going to keep adding to that defensive line. And so whether it's someone in-house or in the future, eventually, they're going to look to replace him. I think Nolan Smith is probably the candidate on the roster now that is in line for that position. Just again, his versatility, his ability to play in space, but also put his hand in the dirt. And realistically, I don't think that if you're Haason Reddick's camp and you're looking for a 3-year deal, I don't think you're going to get that in Philadelphia. You might be able to if it's pretty team friendly, but if that's what he's looking for and that's what he's seeking out, I think that it only makes sense for him to kind of weigh his options. I think that that's one of the things that makes players want to come to Philly. Like, it goes hand in hand, right? This is a player first front office for the most part. People want to come here, and it's for reasons like this, where they say, hey, listen, we're going to be honest and upfront about it. We don't know in 3 years, we don't know at the end of this year if we're going to be able to give you a 3-year contract or that long-term contract that kind of coasts you to retirement. We have some guys waiting in the wings, and we're always looking to add to our defensive line. So we'll let you go out there and see what your value is worth and see what you can get with another team. And hopefully at the end of the day, Haason Reddick likes what we're building here in Philly. And I think that's kind of the front office's opinion. And I think for both parties, if he wants to be here, it will be because they've allowed him to do that. I think when you force a player to be here with that kind of deadline hanging over their head, we're not going to get the best season out of Haason Reddick. So you let him go see what's out there. Hopefully a trade's not necessary. At least you get one more year out of him in Philly. Who knows what happens after that? But I think, again, what part of the reason why players want to play here is because they're upfront and honest about it. And this is one of those products that you have to let players kind of do what's best for them.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of interpreting it as a trade request from Reddick at the time, which Morgan, as you said, is not the case. And Reddick even took to Twitter to confirm that. I think it was Jordan Schultz who initially reported that Reddick did not request the trade himself, and then Reddick actually confirmed that report on top of it. And unfortunately, yeah, this is a business. This is part of it. This is kind of the ugly side. This is very Harry Roseman to have this type of situation happen. It is not the end of the world as far as locker room chemistry is concerned. This is not, a quote unquote malcontent in the locker room. Is this a scenario where someone is, not happy with the current contract that they're on? Yes, but this is the NFL. That happens. Just about every player is not happy with the deal that they're on, unless your name's Chase Daniels. There's just players who are constantly looking to earn more and more money because this shelf life is so short. And when you are producing at the level that Haason Reddick has, yes, you want to be compensated for it. That's a true fact of life across whether it's the NFL or even you really, I hate when people compare professional sports to day jobs because they are not the same thing. But one thing that is absolutely the same is that you want to be compensated for the work that you feel you're putting in. So I think there's nothing at all wrong for Haason Reddick wanting to get a pay bump. I think that he deserved that even last year. So moving into this year, it was a down year, sure, but just the potential for him to thrive under Vic Fangio this year. He has, Brian, you mentioned that he was the best player on the defensive line. I'd say given the lack of certainty of Darius Slay coming off of that knee injury, he's the best player on the defense right now. He's proven that he is that top player entering this new season. So you find a way to make it work. You make a little bit of a concession. You don't just say, all right, well, here's the check, you fill it out. You can never do that in the NFL, but you have to be willing to make some concessions. And Reddick has to be willing to play ball, and I think that he is, which is why I think that eventually this does get resolved.
I completely agree with that. And I feel like he's very important because, listen, you have Jalen Hurts, you have A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith. Like, you have that kind of talent on offense, right? Defense right now is like, yeah, we have the potential of Jalen Carter. We have the potential of Jordan Davis. We have possibly Fletcher Cox. Nolan Smith could be something. Darius Slay, we don't know what he's going to be. James Bradbury, we want him out of here. Sidney Brown's coming off a torn ACL. Kevin Byard might get cut. It's too many unknowns, right? Like, you don't want to go into the season with that many unknowns. But Haason Reddick, like this, again, there's something contagious about the way he plays. And when he's on, he's on. I mean, the guy he's a disruptor. He's, to me, he's as good as a TJ Watt, as a Myles Garrett when he's placed in the right defense. Last season was an anomaly. Like, Nick Sirianni made a bonehead move of, promoting and demoting his guys. Like, you should not have done that. And we didn't get to see much of Reddick, rushing a passer. Sometimes we saw like 4 defensive tackles rushing a passer and Reddick dropping into coverage. There's so many variables as to what the Eagles can look like if they resolve this the right way and they resolve this the wrong way. You move on, there's no guarantee that your defensive line is going to be as good as it once was unless you sign somebody off the free agency on a team-friendly deal. But that's not a guarantee nowadays. Like, these guys, they want their money. I feel like this is a move you have to make. This is a guy you have to keep. I get it. He's 30 years old. But he's probably one of the more consistent pass rushers in the league. I mean, he's had 10-plus seasons with sacks, 10-plus sacks each season for the last 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. It's you need this guy. It's a no-brainer. Make it happen one way or another. You made it happen with Darius Slay. You made it happen with James Bradbury. Now get whoever you need to get off the books and make this contract happen, and let's move forward. At the end of the day, this is a Super Bowl window that's very wide open right now. As long as Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are together, their Super Bowl window is as wide open as it can be. And you need the guys on defense to show up and do their part as well. That should have ended with a question, but
I will say that worst case scenario, if the Eagles aren't able to reach an agreement with Haason Reddick, there are a lot of talented defensive ends that could become available or are available either in free agency or via trade. I think there's going to be a lot of movement this year. Every single year, it feels like the NFL gets closer to like an NBA offseason where there's so many moving parts. So I think even, and again, this is more the business side of things, but even for Howie, hearing Haason's value in based on other teams of it, that will help him to gauge, realistically, how much are other options going to cost? Maybe we do have to spend that premium dollar. And again, I don't think that's, dishonoring how good Haason Reddick is or how important he is to this team. It's just, again, it is a business. And so, understanding that Haason's going to go out and see what his value is, it allows Howie that time too to maybe make some calls and see what is out there and available and how much that's going to cost. And so, it would really suck to lose a player like that, but I don't think it's a matter of, Haason leaves and there's no one there to fill his shoes. I think whether it's, a combination of the young guys and a vet or just, signing a superstar or trading for a superstar, I think that Howie will find a way to fill that gap. You know how important the defensive line is for him. So I'm not too concerned with a gaping hole. If Haason leaves, I think it'll get filled, but obviously you want to retain your guys, and he's definitely an Eagle through and through. And then you talk about the scheme fit. I mean, I don't think you can really ask for much better for a Vic Fangio defense. So I would love to keep him here, but I think that worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, Howie will find an answer.
Do you think Howie would spend big money on a Daniel Hunter if he were to be a free agent? I mean, his market value right now is 3-year, $60 million contract, $20 million annually, which I think is too shy of what Reddick is getting paid this season.
I think the variable on the defensive line is Fletcher Cox. I think You see how much money is going to be tied up into him if he retires. I mean, it feels like he's not going to retire. Like that's what it feels like. So you might have more money tied up in the defensive line than you like at this point. But I think that you're already letting Haason Reddick kind of see what's out there. I don't think that you can let Fletch do the same. Not that I don't think Fletch is interested. I think he wants to retire an Eagle, but that does tie up some mobility in terms of cap room for you.
Fair game. So again, not much coming out of Eagles camp, right? Besides the Haason Reddick stuff, which we hope gets resolved sooner rather than later. Jason Kelce still said that he's a couple of weeks out from retiring or not retiring. Fletcher Cox, another anomaly. We don't know what's going on with him. But before we wrap up the show, did you guys see the tweet from the 33rd team of their QB power rankings entering the 2024 offseason?
The cloud, not the cloud chasing tweet. The what's it called? Fishing for interaction, whatever.
Clickbait.
Clickbait.
Yeah, it's clickbait. It's clickbait for sure. It's pretty rough. Brian, do you want to break it down for Morgan?
Absolutely. So here's Morgan. Here's what we have on the menu today.
Is he in the top 10? Is he in the top 10?
All right. I'm going to read you to the top 10. I'm not going to answer that question. Okay.
I might have to hang up if this goes. All right.
Number one is going to be Patrick Mahomes. Number two, Lamar Jackson. 3, Josh Allen.
Yep.
4, Justin Herbert.
Okay.
5, Matthew Stafford.
All right.
6, Dak Prescott.
Okay.
7, CJ Stroud.
Yeah. All right.
8,
I see how this list is going.
8, Trevor Lawrence. 9, Joe Burrow, which I feel like that's super disrespectful. 10, Jordan Love. So that's your top 10 right there.
All right.
We're gonna go to the next 10, right?
Yeah.
So 11 is Kyler Murray. 12 is Geno Smith. 13 is Kirk Cousins. 14 is Jared Goff. 15 is Aaron Rodgers, who played 5 minutes this season.
Yeah.
16 is Anthony Richardson, who coming off injury.
Cool.
17 is Jalen Hurts.
17. Right. All those quarterbacks that made the playoffs are before Jalen Hurts. That's crazy that there's 16 other quarterbacks that made the playoffs.
It's crazy that there's 16 other quarterbacks that made it above the QB whose completion percentage was higher than expected.
At least Brock Purdy's not above him. That was what I was waiting for.
He's actually number 18. He's right on the cusp.
Right below him.
Yeah, he's right there.
Which is another thing that I'm shocked how Purdy isn't above Anthony Richardson, which I mean is
Anthony Richardson is
Kyler Murray. Like, come on, guys.
Kyler Murray, the Matt Stafford's so high also. Like, I get it. He played really well, but that's Jared Goff also played really well in that system.
Can we talk about Justin Herbert at number 4?
I mean, watch the tape. Put on the tape from last year, man. I get it. He had a lot of injured receivers, but you're talking about guys, for example, like Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love does not get enough credit, man. He's done really well. I'm fine with him being at the end of the top 10 right now, right? So there's some spots on that list, but like Justin Herbert, like, at some point, if you're that great of a quarterback, you make it work,
I feel like you can't name 5 quarterbacks that are better than Jalen Hurts.
5? Okay, so I'm Patrick Mahomes at 1 makes sense. Lamar's the MVP. That makes sense. I think Josh Allen's better than Jalen Hurts right now, realistically.
I think you still have to say Joe Burrow for now.
So Burrow at 4.
The one thing I would say with Jalen, like everyone talks about how good the receivers are on the Eagles. I would argue that the Bengals have, a better 1-2, or at least have had a better 1-2 for the last.
Well, they have a better 1 through 3
for sure, but the offensive line is significantly worse in Cincinnati.
That's
is the other thing you have to look at.
Yeah, and they haven't had the same running game. Joe Mixon is
that's 4 QBs, right?
Yeah.
We're at number 5.
Where's Tua on that list? We didn't hear Tua's name.
Tua is number 19. So they have Hurts, Purdy, and Tua right there as a trifecta, and Mayfield's behind them. But
another
I feel
guy
like
who doesn't get enough credit.
Yes.
Baker, man. Baker's coming back in a big way, man.
Oh, he's coming back with a big money contract for sure.
I feel like Baker should get more credit than Trevor Lawrence did. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is number 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trevor Lawrence he's got the skill set, but I just feel like he hasn't yet put it all together. And part of it's been coaching, obviously. Part of it's been other members of the team kind of like falling apart here and there. But I'm not I'm bought in that Trevor Lawrence can be a star quarterback, but there's tendencies with him that are making me want to put him in a similar class to Justin Herbert. Of guy has all the talent in the world, but he's just not among those top QBs for me.
Yeah,
Fair.
I think Trevor Lawrence doesn't lose you any games, but I don't know that he wins you that many, and that's the biggest. I feel like that's the biggest caveat for like a superstar quarterback is how many of these guys can win you games.
And that's why I feel like Jalen Hurts deserves to be in that top 5 conversation. Not only, I mean, he has the arm talent. We know this. He could throw a damn good deep ball. But on top of that, like his expected completion percentage in this year's offense was below, like I think like 28th, was below league, way below league average, right? But his actual completion percentage in this offense was way above. It was number 1 in the NFL. Like that speaks volumes as to what he was able to do in a stale offense.
There's that chart that I found on Twitter. I had to share it because it was like expected versus actual completion percentage, and he's just like in his own category, way at the top corner, and no one else is even close.
Exactly.
And, yeah. So to take that much disrespect, I mean, it's a comical list. Let's just leave it at that. Like we've already given it more time than it's worth, but we got it, right? That's what we're here for, right? To give those things a little bit of time. But yeah, ridiculous list. I feel for Justin Herbert though. I don't think it's talent problem. I think
it's
situation.
It was terrible. He was in
situations, coaching. Obviously, you have guys on the team like, I mean, Austin Eckler was such a letdown last year, and you can blame as much as you want on Brandon Staley, and a lot of it rightfully so. But you had guys who were hurt in other areas. You mentioned that earlier. That obviously hurts you as well. But then you have guys who are just not delivering. And Eckler was kind of hurt off and on last year. He fell to me in 8 in fantasy, and maybe I'm a little bit sour about his performance. But I think that next year you're going to be looking for a lot to change in LA under new head coach, potentially new offensive scheme, and maybe now we finally see him take that game to the next level. But some of the other players around him are going to have to step up as well.
And I mean, we finally got a first-round receiver that was worse than Jalen Reagor, so that's something on the Chargers. So Quentin Johnson was maybe one of the worst first-round receivers I can remember. So.
I don't know. I mean, how are you guys feeling about this year's draft? Are you guys excited about it for Philly, or are you guys kind of like, shit, let's see how free agency pans out, or is it kind of just
I mean,
off?
4 picks in the first 3 rounds, I'm always excited.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how I generally feel about it. Your team can always get better. There's huge positions of opportunity for Philadelphia. The frustrating part is separating what the objective like the fan would do versus what Howie Roseman is actually going to do. Like for instance, people can put linebackers in the second round of the draft, mock drafts, all that they want. That doesn't mean that that's what Philadelphia is going to do. I would be shocked if they select a linebacker with their first 3 picks, unless they drastically trade down. But other than that, I think there's a lot of excitement to have. I think there are some supremely talented players at positions of need. And I think, I don't know, I just have this feeling that there's going to be a bit of movement on the board that could lead to some guys who could really help Philadelphia kind of slipping down a little bit. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. For me, this is one of those drafts where, it might not be super flashy at first. Like, I feel like first round, there's an opportunity to kind of make a splash. Like, they grab one of those corners. I think, again, there's going to be a lot of corners that kind of rise up the draft boards. And if the Eagles can kind of steal one at the end of the first round, I mean, talk about Trent McDuffie, there's a guy, right, where, you're able to get corners at the places that Philly has picks, right? So I think that could be your big splash. And I think the rest of it might just be kind of retooling that tool chest. And it might be the case that you look back in 3 years and go, wow, that was a kind of franchise cementing draft for Philly. Because I think they're desperately in need of restocking the cupboards at certain positions. And I think that this draft, as far as I can tell, has a lot of those blue chip guys that are, tough, hardworking football guys. And I think the Eagles need some of those. They got all. I mean, if you realistically, if you look at the last 3 years, like there's been so much talent added to this team. They just need the foundation guys, the guys that are gonna do the dirty jobs. And I think that the special teams, for example, has made a huge turnaround. Like that's the result of that. That's the result of good drafting, getting young guys in. So I think that this is going to be another one of those drafts. Might not look flashy at first, but like Zach said, the armchair drafters might not be as happy with it. But I think if you look, 3 years in the future and kind of look back, it's going to be a great draft.
I kind of wish, excuse me. I kind of wish the Eagles stuck it out with Russell Douglas. Like I feel like that era of Jim Schwartz just not using him correctly. He's gonna, I mean, to me, it bit them in the ass because he was successful in Green Bay. I think he's up for an extension in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a guy I wish we had back. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see what this team adds in the coming months. I mean, they have a lot to do on defense. They don't have much to do on offense unless Jason Kelce retires. But even so, I feel like Tyler Steen at right guard, Cam Jurgens at center, I feel like we'll be perfectly fine. We got to figure out running back, right? And we got to figure out is it DeAndre Swift or is it possibly Saquon Barkley, who the Eagles have the second highest odds of signing? Or could it be a guy from the draft? There's a kid that they posted from Oregon. Oh my God, his name escapes me.
Bucky Irving.
Yes. The dude is slippery, man. Have you guys seen his film? Like the people, like tacklers just fall off his skin. Like it's nasty, man. I love it. Having a guy like that, I think, would be great as well.
Well, what's nice about this draft in particular, and we'll get more into this as we get closer and closer to the draft. So there's not that Saquon in this draft necessarily, but there's a lot of there may even be like 10 to 15 running backs who are all like quality starter type level guys who, they all exceed in one area or another. Like Will Shipley out of Clemson's an example of a guy who could realistically go anywhere from the late second to the end of the fourth round. And he's just an insane pass catching option. Someone who I think that I don't think Philadelphia would ever use him right, but he's just a guy that, but you don't know with Kellen Moore. That actually might be the difference if you're thinking about it that way. But he's a guy who I think is going to be electric for some team out there in a very, very, and hear me when I say this, a very, very light Christian McCaffrey sense. Somebody who's able to, be a bit slippery through the tackles up the middle, work a little bit on the outside, and then also just be an absolute fiend in the receiving game. So there's guys all over the place when you're looking at backs. And then there's even Frank Gore Jr., who's just an absolute boat of a human being that you can get real late in the draft if you're just looking for.
He's not a running back, though, right? If I'm not mistaken, did I read that wrong?
Frank Gore Jr. is a running back.
Yep.
Why did I read that he's a wide receiver, a tight end? I don't know where.
He's definitely not a wide receiver. I can tell you that.
It threw me off completely. I'm like, no, there's no possible way. I could have sworn he was a running back.
No, yeah. So between drafting Frank Gore Jr. and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the Eagles have a chance to draft the sons of two Eagles legends. So we'll see what happens come draft time.
Well, so we're gonna wrap up the show now. We give you guys a quick show, right? But one thing I do want to say, this is episode 199. Next week is episode 200. This podcast was started several years ago with Chris and myself, right? And throughout time, it's changed and it's evolved into Morgan, Zach, Eric. We've had a hell of a run, right? We've had guys like Brian Dawkins on the show. We've had legendary people on the show, legendary analysts on left and right. And I'm not gonna lie, I can't wait for episode 200. I did invite somebody that was a part of episode 1, who is the hardest person in show business to get on your damn show, even though he runs your damn company. But I did get Liam Jenkins to agree to a Tuesday night podcast.
Oh, I thought you meant Chris. Oh, okay.
No.
I thought you meant Brian Dawkins. So
Oh, that would be phenomenal. I'll drop it off with Brian Dawkins. But yeah, it's episode 200 next week, guys. We're gonna have Liam on the podcast. We're gonna have Eric back. Eric is currently celebrating his oh my God, yes, his fiance's birthday today. So big happy birthday to her. Big shout out to Eric.
Happy birthday, Jackie.
Yes,
happy
absolutely.
Birthday, Jackie.
And first and foremost, we appreciate all you guys for tuning in today. Definitely tune into next week.
Howie Roseman also, we know you watch, so if you want to come on next week, Just saying. We know you're watching.
I'm convinced somebody over there watches because there's a lot of things that we say on this show and it ends up happening. And like that's things like, we don't get credit for.
And
I feel like
we will bump Liam for Howie just to make that perfectly
absolutely,
clear. So
dude.
we
Liam.
will do that. We're ready to
go.
go.
Hell of a run for an Eagles podcast hosted by a Giants fan. Yo, that has to be historical. I mean, it's just got to be one for the books.
That's true.
But yeah, we'll be back next week, guys. Episode 200.
Episode 200. Brian's just gonna shed his skin and just gonna be a Giants fan. Underneath.
I'm gonna wear my wife's Giants hoodie for episode 200. How about that one?
Okay, Brian's wearing his wife's clothes on the pod. Looking forward to it. Gonna be a great night for everyone.
Finally get to be yourself, man. I'm happy for you.
Let it all out. Until next week, you piece of shit. Oh God! Until next week, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Morgan Burkett and the Zach guy that just comes on the show once in a blue.
When I feel like it. I come on when I feel like it. I'm usually a bit late. It's just it is what it is.
I can leave if you guys want to have a discussion. That's fine. I can get out of your hair.
Oh God. Hey, can we acknowledge Buddy Hield is balling for the Sixers right now?
Oh hell yeah, absolutely, dude.
That was a hell of a freaking move.
I mean, he's dishing passes left and right. He didn't even cost a first round pick. It's absolutely insane. So, great time for the Sixers heading into the break. Still pretty bare bones as far as who's playing and who's not. Half the roster is sick, injured, or dead. So it's pretty rough right now in certain ways. But coming off a great win in Cleveland, so. Got Miami tomorrow night. I'll be down at the Farg down there.
You guys treat Kyle Lowry well, man. He's a legend.
He's home.
We will.
He's home, Morgan. He's home.
He's home for now, but he's gonna retire a Raptor. Just saying.
Yeah, probably, but he will
enjoy him.
He'll do well for us come the playoffs. I do feel he's officially, as of about an hour ago, he's officially a Sixer. So that's good to finally put pen to paper there. And he's keeping the number 7, which is exciting. Mo Bamba giving up 7. He's going to take on 5. Somebody's already breaking out the Bamba number 5 jokes. And it's the vibes in Philadelphia have not been this high in quite a long time, despite Joel's injury. So it's a good time for the Sixers, at least. Flyers are still killing it. Basically, things are going very well for everyone except for the Eagles right now. So it's super high vibes.
We'll get there, guys. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But until next week, let's get to next week. Let's get to episode 200. Let's celebrate together. Zach said he's gonna pop a bottle of Hennessy. Morgan said he's gonna pop a bottle of Crown Royal.
Sure.
Oh, why not, right?
Yeah.
All right. Until next week, guys. Brian Cameron, Zach, Morgan. We're Flipping the Birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Yes, sir.
Flipping the Birds.